My name's Jack. I'm 46 years old, born and raised in Ohio, and if you're hearing this, if anyone's still out there, then you need to understand one thing right away. None of this happened fast. The world didn't fall overnight. It bled out, slowly, like a wound no one wanted to look at. It started with the broadcast. It was a Thursday evening. I'd just gotten home from another 12-hour shift at the warehouse in Columbus. I cracked open a beer, microwaved some leftover pasta, and turned on the local news, same way I did every night. But instead of weather reports or high school football scores, the anchor's voice was shaking. They were talking about isolated incidents in Cleveland. People attacking strangers in broad daylight. Biting, clawing. At first, they said it was some kind of synthetic drug epidemic. A bad batch of meth. Bath salts all over again. But the footage told a different story. They showed shaky cell phone clips, too raw for TV, but they aired them anyway. A woman on Euclid Avenue, clothes soaked in blood, tearing into a man's throat while bystanders screamed. Police trying to pull her off, only for her to turn and sink her teeth into the officer's face. He screamed. She didn't stop. Not until someone shot her. The anchor tried to smile through it like it was just another crazy story. Authorities are urging calm, she said. Her voice cracked on the word calm. I remember turning the volume down and just sitting there, beer sweating in my hand, thinking, I've seen some crazy shit in my life, but this feels different. The next morning at the warehouse, half the guys were joking about it. Zombie apocalypse. They laughed, nudging each other like kids at recess. But underneath the jokes, everyone kept checking their phones for updates. Nobody was really laughing. By that night, the incidents weren't just in Cleveland anymore. Dayton, Cincinnati, Toledo, and then Columbus. That's where I was when the first one came through the sliding doors of the Kroger on High Street. But I'll get to that. For now, you need to understand what it felt like in those early days. The denial, the nervous laughter, the way the world clung to the idea that things were still normal. Because when it all broke apart, when the streets filled with screams and sirens and the smell of burning gasoline, that denial is what killed most people. They didn't believe it was real until it was chewing through their throats. I only survived because I stopped pretending. And because of what happened inside that grocery store. The day it really began for me was a Saturday. I should have been at home fixing the leaky sink or mowing the lawn. That's what normal life was supposed to be about. Instead, I was standing in the checkout line at the Kroger on High Street, a basket of canned chili, bread, and coffee in my hands, staring at the jittery expressions of everyone around me. It was crowded, too crowded for a Saturday morning. People weren't shopping like normal. They were panic buying. Carts piled high with bottled water, flour, and toilet paper. The kind of panic you can't fake. The store's PA system buzzed overhead, some poor teenage employee calling for a manager, her voice cracking. The lines moved slower than molasses. Tension hung so heavy in the air it made my jaw ache. That's when the first scream cut through the checkout chatter. At first, nobody reacted. We're Midwesterners. We hear a loud noise and pretend it didn't happen. But then came a second scream, sharper, closer. A child crying. And then chaos. I dropped my basket and pushed through the crowd toward the produce section. Bananas and apples lay scattered across the floor, crushed under people's shoes. And in the middle of the chaos, a man was on top of a woman, his teeth buried in her neck. Not a lover's quarrel. Not a mugging. He wasn't just biting her, he was tearing. Blood sprayed across the tile, slick and too bright under the fluorescence. She gurgled, tried to scream, then went limp. The man's face came up slick and red, his mouth stretched wide with a sound I'll never forget. Not a growl, not a scream. Something in between. A broken noise like a dog that had forgotten how to bark. Two stock boys tried to pull him off and he swung his head at them, snapping his teeth. One of the boys, just a kid, couldn't have been older than 19, caught a scratch across the cheek. He staggered back, hand pressed to his face, already crying. People ran for the exits, screaming, trampling one another. Some froze, filming it on their phones like idiots. I just stood there for a second, rooted to the floor, my brain refusing to process what my eyes were feeding it. Then the man looked up. His eyes, Jesus. They were milk white, filmed over like cataracts, but moving, jittering, locking on me. He let out that same broken sound and started crawling across the bloody tile toward me. Not running, crawling like some busted animal dragging itself to fresh meat. I should have run. I should have bolted like everyone else. But my body didn't move. 46 years old and my knees locked like I was a kid caught in headlights. The only thing that saved me was the sound of metal clanging. One of the workers had swung a broom handle at him. Caught him across the skull. The thing collapsed for a moment, twitching, then tried to get up again. That's when someone shouted, "Lock the doors. Now." And just like that, we weren't customers anymore. We weren't neighbors or strangers. We were prey trapped in a grocery store with something we didn't understand. And it was only the beginning. When the shout came to lock the doors, something inside me snapped loose. The shock was gone. Instinct took over. I wasn't the only one. A handful of us, maybe 10, moved without thinking. We grabbed carts, shelves, anything with wheels, and rammed them against the front sliding doors. Those doors were still trying to open, sensors whining each time some poor bastard outside threw their weight against them. People were clawing to get in, not just the things out there but living people too. Their faces pressed to the glass, eyes wide with terror. Some of them were pounding their fists bloody. We hesitated. Do we let them in? If we do, how do we know who's bitten, who's safe? Then one of them fell against the glass, sliding down in a trail of red. And another figure, gray skin, jaw slack, eyes white, lurched into view and tore at the body. That decided it. We shoved the doors shut with a final slam of carts and shelves. The locks clicked. The pounding on the other side didn't stop. Inside, the survivors staggered together near the checkout lanes, breathing hard. About 20 of us, maybe more. Some families. A couple of employees in red polos. A handful of people like me just in the wrong place at the wrong time. The woman who shouted earlier stepped forward. She was mid-30s, tall, blonde ponytail, wearing a nurse's scrubs. Her name tag read, Emily. "We stay put," she said, voice sharp, cutting through the panic. "We barricade. We use what we have. This is safer than running blind out there." A man in a suit, sweating through his dress shirt, snapped back. "Are you insane? We can't just stay here." "Step outside if you don't like it," I told him, the words leaving my mouth before I realized I'd said them. My voice sounded older than I felt, gravel scraping my throat. He didn't argue after that. We moved fast. The employees knew the layout, led us through back storage. Pallets of soda, crates of canned food, stacks of toilet paper, gold. We pushed heavy pallets to reinforce the doors. Someone found chains in the hardware aisle and looped them through the handles. For hours we worked like ants. The pounding on the glass faded, then returned, then faded again. Each time it was a different rhythm. Sometimes human fists. Sometimes not. By nightfall, the fluorescent lights buzzed above us, and the air smelled like fear and sweat. We gathered in the break room, silent, staring at each other across the plastic tables. That was when the reality set in. We weren't going home. Not tonight. Maybe not ever. I sat in the corner, hands aching, and listened to the muffled groans pressing faintly through the walls. The nurse, Emily, met my eyes. She didn't say anything, but I knew we were thinking the same thing. We had turned a grocery store into a fortress. And every fortress is only as strong as the people inside. By the second night inside, the adrenaline had worn off, leaving something heavier behind, an exhaustion that seeped into your bones and made it impossible to think straight. I sat on a stack of pallets in the corner of the grocery store's office supply aisle, trying to untangle my thoughts. People had begun to introduce themselves, cautiously, like humans do when everything else is trying to kill them. There was Emily, the nurse, sharp and pragmatic. She immediately took charge of first aid, checking scratches, bruises, and who had eaten what. A man named Tony, late 20s, ex-con, tattooed arms, claimed he knew how to handle this kind of thing. He didn't explain how. His bravado didn't impress anyone. Then there was Mrs. Clark, an elderly woman who had come in for milk and bread. She kept muttering prayers under her breath and clutching her small terrier like it was a talisman. And Tommy, a boy no older than 14, clutching a backpack with comic books and a baseball glove. He refused to talk about his parents. Every time someone asked, he just shrugged and stared at the floor. The unspoken rule quickly became clear. You survive, you cooperate, or you die. And Jack, me, suddenly felt the weight of 46 years of living pressing down. I wasn't just a survivor. I had to be the one making the hard calls. We drew up a rough plan. Emily suggested shifts for watching the barricades. Tony and a few others would patrol the aisles, searching for anything we could use: food, tools, weapons. The rest of us would reinforce the doors, block off sections, and try to sleep in shifts. Trust was a fragile currency. I noticed the way some people whispered behind others' backs, the way eyes darted nervously at shadows. But I also saw moments of humanity. Mrs. Clark insisted on making a small tea for everyone, using the old employee lounge kettle. Tony, grumbling, shared some protein bars he'd found in the back. We learned each other's weaknesses fast. Emily panicked if she saw blood without gloves. Tony had a quick temper but froze in a crisis. Tommy didn't eat unless someone forced him. And me? I realized I carried the weight of responsibility heavier than I'd ever felt in my life. That first night, we huddled in the break room, listening to the groans outside, the scraping sounds against the metal doors. Every time the lights flickered, every time we heard that telltale rattle of glass or metal, our hearts jumped. I didn't know it then, but that night would set the tone for the next year. Every decision, every argument, every choice to trust, or not trust, would come back to haunt us. I felt it in my gut. Survival wasn't just about keeping the zombies out. It was about keeping the people in line, and keeping myself from breaking first. By sunrise, we were a group, however fragile, bound together by fear. And fear, I would learn, was the strongest glue there is. By the third day, the world outside the grocery store had stopped being a rumor. We knew the truth. Columbus, Ohio, the city I'd called home for 46 years, was burning. I climbed up to the store's rooftop, a habit I picked up when the panic first started. From there, you could see the horizon, smoke curling over the skyline, distant fires lighting the sky like an infernal sunset. Sirens wailed, then cut off abruptly, leaving a hollow silence that pressed in on you. Emily followed me, eyes wide but steady. "It's worse than I thought," she muttered. I didn't answer. Words felt useless. Houses were ablaze, cars overturned in the streets. Figures moved like shadows, slow and jerking. Too many of them to count, too many to care about individually. Inside the store, the group was tense. Everyone had noticed the change in the sounds outside. The groaning was no longer occasional, it was constant, a tide of hunger pressing at the walls. The wind carried it in, rattling the metal doors, scratching the windows. Tony, ever the bravado man, tried to make a joke about Columbus becoming a zombie theme park. He failed miserably, no one laughed. Mrs. Clark hugged her terrier tighter. "It's the end," she whispered, and I didn't argue. I could feel my stomach twist, the same knot that had formed the moment the first man lunged at me in Kroger. Only now it wasn't just one man. It was the entire city. And the smell, smoke, blood, decay, was creeping toward us even through the sealed doors. Emily and I started mapping escape routes if we needed them. We didn't want to leave, but we had to prepare for the inevitable. The barricade could only hold for so long. That night, the first real attack came. A group of figures, 5 or 6, smashing the sliding doors with metal rods, screaming a wordless chorus of rage. Their groans were wet, desperate, and human enough to make your stomach heave. We fought them off with carts, broom handles, anything we could grab. One of them, just a teenager, I realized too late, got through the back emergency exit. I saw Emily freeze, panic flash in her eyes, before she pulled the metal shelf across the doorway. The sound of bones cracking echoed. I turned away. Tommy cried quietly, clutching his baseball glove. When silence returned, it wasn't relief. It was fear. Fear of knowing that the city wasn't just collapsing, it was gone. That night, as we huddled in the break room, I realized something I hadn't before. Survival wasn't just about the barricades or the weapons. It was about staying sane. And the city burning beneath us was a constant reminder of what we'd lost, and what we might become if we weren't careful. I lay awake, listening to the groaning, the distant fires, the occasional crash, and I made a silent promise. I would protect this group even if it destroyed me. Even if it turned me into someone I didn't recognize. Because in this world, morality was a luxury. And survival? Survival was all that mattered. The day we decided to leave the store, even for a few hours, was the day I realized survival demanded more than courage. It demanded choices we weren't ready to make, and some we'd regret forever. Emily gathered us in the break room, her face pale but determined. We need food, water, medical supplies. We can't just sit here waiting for them to break in. Tony groaned, arms crossed. So we walk into the apocalypse for a bag of chips? I didn't answer. I had already strapped on my backpack, checked my flashlight, and loaded a crowbar. If we were going out, I wanted to be ready. We left in pairs, scanning the streets from the rooftop first. Columbus was a skeleton of itself. Cars burned, overturned, abandoned. Windows shattered. Fires flickered in the distance, painting the night sky orange. And everywhere, moving in jerky, unnatural motions, were the infected. I volunteered to go with Tony. Emily took Mrs. Clark and Tommy. We had to be careful, fast, quiet, coordinated. But as soon as we hit the streets, chaos greeted us. We ducked behind a burnt-out minivan, watching a group of them shuffle past. Their moans were wet and hungry, like the sound of drowning. One of them noticed us. I froze, heart pounding, as it turned its milky white eyes in our direction. Tony lunged with the crowbar. I wanted to yell at him, but he was already swinging. It hit the creature's skull with a sickening crunch. It fell, twitching, and I realized that killing didn't feel heroic. It felt necessary. Inside a nearby pharmacy, we scavenged what we could: bandages, painkillers, canned beans, and bottles of water. Every step was a risk. Every noise could attract more of them. And with each item we carried, we realized the cost wasn't just danger, it was trust. Tommy's backpack was heavy with supplies, and he kept glancing at the street outside, eyes wide. Emily noticed. She pulled him close. "You're doing good, kid," she whispered. "We all are." On the way back, we encountered another group of survivors. They were desperate, more violent than afraid. When they demanded our supplies, I had a choice: fight or give in. I fought. Tony and I managed to scare them off, but the victory felt hollow. One of the strangers fell, twisted in the street, moaning before Tony delivered the final blow. I couldn't meet his eyes afterward. Survival was no longer just about staying alive. It was about making the right choices when every option was wrong. By the time we returned to the grocery store, bruised and exhausted, I realized that the barricade wasn't just a physical defense anymore. It was a mental one. Inside we were safe. Outside, the world was unrecognizable. That night, as we sorted the supplies, I sat in the corner, holding my head in my hands. The groans outside were louder, more desperate. Fires burned further, the wind carrying smoke and ash through the vents. I looked at the group. We were alive, yes, but at what cost? Mrs. Clark rocked her terrier silently. Tony cleaned his bloodied hands. Tommy stared at the floor. Emily checked on the supplies again, methodical, precise, like a soldier bracing for the next battle. And I realized the truth. In this new world, there would always be a price. Every day, every decision, every step outside the barricade demanded a sacrifice. And the worst part? I knew we hadn't paid it all yet. The night came faster than I expected. The sun slipped behind the horizon, leaving the city bathed in a dim, blood-orange glow from the fires still burning blocks away. Inside the store, we moved like shadows, setting up extra barricades, checking weapons, and whispering in low voices. Emily organized shifts for watching the doors. No one sleeps through the night, she warned. Even a minute of inattention could get us killed. I took the first watch, crouched behind a pallet of water bottles near the front entrance. The groans outside were constant now, a haunting chorus that pressed against the reinforced glass. Shadows flitted in the flickering light. The closer they got, the more human they seemed and the more terrifying. Then it started. A pounding on the doors, hard, deliberate. They weren't testing us anymore. They were coming. Tony grabbed a broom handle, swinging it like a club. I hefted a crowbar. Mrs. Clark and her terrier huddled together in the corner. Tommy's hand found mine, gripping tight. I felt his fear like a second heartbeat. The front door shook violently. Glass rattled. Metal groaned. And then, through the chaos, one of them, no older than a teenager, managed to wedge itself between a crate and the door. Its face was twisted, gray and wet, lips curling back as it hissed. Emily screamed. Tony swung. The thing fell, twitching, and the others outside seemed to hesitate, maybe sensing their fallen comrade. I realized then that it wasn't just a physical attack. It was psychological. Every groan, every scrape, every shadow that moved unnaturally was meant to break us before it even touched us. Hours passed in a blur of strikes, shoves, and shouted commands. Each time one got too close, I felt a spark of something primal, rage, fear, and a desperate instinct to survive. By midnight, we were battered, shaking, exhausted. When the first light of dawn hit the shelves, we counted heads. Everyone was alive, but the victory was hollow. Tony had a cut across his shoulder. Emily's hands were raw from makeshift bandages. Tommy refused to eat, eyes wide and haunted. I sat on the floor, crowbar beside me, and watched the sun rise over the city through a cracked window. The fire still burned, smoke curling into the sky. Columbus was gone, replaced by something unrecognizable. And I knew deep down that this was only the beginning. The first night attack was a warning. Survival wasn't just about barricades or weapons. It was about endurance, about holding on to your humanity when everything else was trying to strip it away. I clenched my fists. We had survived. But the world outside was growing stronger, smarter, hungrier. And if we didn't adapt, next time, there might be no one left inside to fight at all. By the third week in the store, the strain was starting to show. Survival was no longer just about keeping the infected out. It was about keeping the people inside from turning on each other. Emily insisted on organizing everything meticulously, rationing food, marking shifts, keeping watch logs. Tony grumbled about military drills, but followed her instructions nonetheless. Tommy kept to himself, silent and watchful, while Mrs. Clark muttered prayers that seemed louder with each passing day. I was in the back, counting cans of beans and bottles of water, when I noticed something. One of the extra rations, the ones Emily had specifically set aside, was missing. Tony? I asked calmly, approaching him. He was leaning against the aisle, cleaning his crowbar. Did you take any extra supplies? His smirk faltered. What? No, why would I? I felt the weight of 46 years in my gut. I wanted to believe him, but the missing food and his defensive posture said otherwise. Trust was a fragile currency in this world, and it was being spent too fast. That night, we gathered in the break room for a ration check. I watched everyone closely. Eyes darted. Hands trembled slightly. The groans outside felt louder, almost as if they were listening. Tony eventually admitted it. He had taken extra food to save for a rainy day, he said. I didn't want to see anyone go hungry if we ran out. I felt a strange mix of anger and understanding. The instinct to survive was raw and selfish. But admitting it openly, betraying the group, was dangerous. Emily's face went pale. We agreed on rationing, Tony. You could have put everyone at risk. Her voice was sharp, trembling with a mix of fear and frustration. The argument escalated and I realized something. This was the real threat. Not the undead outside, not the fires, not the chaos of Columbus. It was ourselves. Human weakness, fear, and selfishness were more dangerous than any zombie. By the end of the night, we didn't resolve anything. We had survived the attack, but our unity had cracked. Trust had been broken, and once broken, it was hard to repair in a world where every mistake could be fatal. I sat alone on the roof afterward, looking at the smoldering city. The skyline was a skeleton of steel and ash. Somewhere out there, thousands of infected roamed freely. And in here we were teetering on the edge of something just as deadly, human betrayal. I realized something terrifying. Survival wasn't just about defending the store. It was about defending the fragile bonds we had left. And if those bonds shattered completely, there would be no coming back. The first betrayal had been small, almost insignificant in the grand scale of things. But it was a warning. A whisper in my mind, in this world you can't trust anyone. Not fully. Not ever. And I wasn't sure I was strong enough to enforce that truth without losing myself in the process. I had taken to sleeping on the roof most nights. The air was colder, cleaner, and the view gave me some sense of perspective. A small comfort in a city that had turned into a nightmare. It was during one of those nights, just after midnight, when I saw it. A figure moving across the rooftops of the buildings across the street. At first, I thought it was another survivor, but the movements were too smooth, too precise, like it was stalking, calculating. It didn't groan, didn't lurch. It watched. I grabbed my binoculars, straining to see through the smoke. The figure stopped, crouched, then vanished behind a collapsed section of roof. My heart was pounding. I hadn't seen another human being besides Emily, Tony, Tommy, and Mrs. Clark in weeks. Could it be someone else still alive? Or something worse? I climbed down quietly, careful not to make noise, and told Emily, "There's someone, or something, on the rooftops. I saw it moving across the other buildings." She frowned, skeptical. "Are you sure it wasn't a zombie? You've been tense lately." I shook my head. "No, it's different. Watch." We crept to the roof together the next evening, armed with flashlights and makeshift weapons. From our vantage point, we could see the figure again, smaller now, seemingly unafraid of the infected wandering the streets below. It paused, looking directly at us, then disappeared down an alley. "What the hell is it?" Tony muttered, gripping his crowbar. Emily's face went pale. "If it's not like them, maybe it's a survivor. Or a scout, something trying to lure us out." I didn't answer. My gut told me this was bigger than a simple encounter. Whoever, or whatever, was out there, it had knowledge we didn't. It moved with purpose. For the first time I felt a flicker of hope, and the same flicker of dread. Hope that there were other humans alive, capable of reasoning and survival. Dread that it might be too late, and that whatever it was could bring unimaginable danger to us. That night, sleep was impossible. I couldn't shake the image of those eyes staring from across the street, calculating, watching. I realized then that the apocalypse wasn't just about survival, it was about understanding. About learning the rules of this new world before it consumed you. And the rooftop discovery was a reminder. We were no longer the only players in the city. By morning, the city below was silent again, except for the occasional crack of burning wood collapsing somewhere in the distance. The rooftop figure from last night had vanished completely, leaving only a lingering sense of unease. Emily and I sat in the break room, maps of Columbus spread out before us. Every street, every alleyway, every potential barricade was marked. The figure had moved somewhere in the industrial district, across the river, a place we hadn't dared to explore yet. "We can't ignore it," Emily said, tapping the map. Her finger hovered over the streets where we'd seen the figure. "If it's a survivor, it could help us. If it's something else, we need to know before it finds us first." Tony leaned against the doorway, arms crossed. "Or we die trying. I say we stay put. Last thing we need is a mysterious stalker knowing exactly where we live." I rubbed my temples. Both options were terrifying. Investigating meant exposing ourselves to unknown threats. Doing nothing meant leaving a possible ally, or predator, out there gathering information about us. Tommy surprisingly broke the silence. "Maybe it wants us to follow it," he said quietly. His voice carried more courage than I expected. "Maybe it's leading us somewhere safe." Mrs. Clark shook her head, clutching her terrier. "I don't trust it. We're lucky to still be alive. Don't go chasing ghosts." I felt the weight of leadership pressing down. Every choice carried consequences, and hesitation could be fatal. But something inside me refused to ignore this. That figure represented something beyond the chaos. Knowledge, maybe even hope. "Here's what we do," I said finally, voice steady. "Emily and I will scout the area tonight. We'll be fast, quiet, and we'll report back. Tony, keep the barricade strong and everyone ready. No one leaves the store until we know what we're dealing with." Emily nodded, determination flashing in her eyes. "We'll take the alley route. It's covered and we can stay off the streets as much as possible." Tony grunted but didn't argue. He trusted me, or maybe he just trusted the necessity of my decisions. As night fell, I felt the familiar knot of tension in my stomach. The streets of Columbus were no longer a city I knew. They were a labyrinth of danger, and every shadow could be a threat or a guide. We slipped out quietly, the grocery store behind us like a fragile fortress holding back the chaos. The world was silent, but I could feel the weight of eyes on us. Not just from the infected, but from the unknown. And I knew deep down that this encounter could change everything. For better, or for worse. The streets of Columbus were silent, almost unnaturally so, as Emily and I slipped into the alleyways. The moon cast jagged shadows across crumbling brick walls, and the smell of smoke and rot hung heavy in the air. We moved cautiously, every step measured, every sound amplified. The city had taught me that silence was just as dangerous as noise. A single misstep could draw the infected, or worse, unknown survivors with unknown intentions. Then we saw it. At first, it was just a silhouette crouched atop a collapsed storefront, perfectly still. Its movements were deliberate, almost animal-like. The figure shifted, crouching lower, then darted down the alley with uncanny speed. Emily's hand tightened on my arm. "There," she whispered. "Do you see it?" I nodded, following silently. The figure paused at the next intersection, seemingly waiting for us to approach. That's when I noticed something strange. It wasn't wearing torn clothes like the infected. Its movements were human, precise, purposeful. We followed cautiously, keeping distance, until it disappeared into a narrow corridor behind an abandoned warehouse. "Wait," Emily said, crouching behind a dumpster. "We can't just storm in. It might be armed." I agreed. The air was thick with tension, and I could feel the adrenaline coursing through my veins. This was no ordinary encounter. Whoever, or whatever, this was, it had been watching us. Maybe even testing us. We edged closer, peering around the corner, and that's when we saw it clearly. The figure was a young woman, ragged but alert. Her eyes scanned the alley like she was reading every possible danger, calculating every movement. She carried a small pack, a makeshift spear strapped to her back, and a quiet confidence that made my skin crawl with unease. She didn't notice us at first, busy rummaging through a box of supplies. Then she froze, slowly turning her head toward us. Her gaze locked onto mine. It wasn't hostile, but it wasn't friendly either. For a long, tense moment, we just stared at each other. I felt Emily's hand tighten on mine. Trust, I realized, was going to be earned in this world, and this woman held the first card. Finally, she spoke, her voice low but firm. "You shouldn't be out here." I swallowed hard. "We could say the same to you." Her eyes flicked to Emily, then back to me. "Maybe. But I've been watching. You're trying to survive. That's obvious." Something about her tone hinted at experience, survival knowledge I didn't have. And for the first time in weeks, I felt a spark of something I hadn't felt in a long while. Hope. But hope in Columbus was dangerous. Too much trust too soon could get you killed. I realized that tonight we weren't just testing her, we were testing ourselves. And in this new world, the first real encounter with another survivor could either save us or destroy everything we'd built inside the grocery store. We kept our distance at first, watching her every move. The young woman, maybe in her early 20s, moved with precision, scanning every corner of the alley before collecting supplies. Emily whispered my name, her voice taut with both caution and curiosity. Finally, I stepped forward, raising my hands slightly to show we meant no harm. "We're not here to fight," I said, keeping my voice low. "We just want to understand who you are." She froze, then relaxed slightly. "You're brave or stupid," she said, her voice carrying a dry edge. "Depends on how the night ends." I gestured toward the grocery store behind us. "We've been holed up there trying to survive. Like you, I suppose." Her eyes narrowed. "Survival, it's a fragile thing. Most people give it up before the world does it for them." There was a pause. Then she introduced herself. "Name's Riley. I've been moving through the city since it started, before anyone thought it was permanent." Emily and I exchanged a glance. "How long have you been out here?" I asked. "Since day 3, she said. Her eyes flicked to the burned-out streets around us. "I watched everything fall apart. People, they didn't survive because of the infected. They survived because of their choices. And I've seen what people will do when desperate." Riley's story unfolded in a way that made my blood run cold. She'd witnessed entire neighborhoods overrun, not just by the infected but by the panic-stricken, those who turned on each other, stealing, lying, killing to survive. She had moved quietly, avoiding the chaos, learning the rules of this new world. "Why haven't we seen anyone else?" Emily asked cautiously. Riley shrugged. "Most survivors are hiding or already dead. The rest, they're waiting for you to make a mistake. I've been alone mostly. But I've seen things, people forming communities, failing, disappearing. And you?" She looked at me sharply. "How many of you left?" "5, I said quietly. "Including us." She studied us for a long moment, then nodded. "You're lucky. But luck won't last. Not here. If you want to survive, you need more than luck. You need strategy, trust, and the willingness to do what others won't." Her words cut deeper than any zombie attack could. I realized she was telling the truth. Our little barricade, our rations, our careful watches, they were not enough. We were surviving by chance, not design. Riley glanced back toward the streets. "If you want, I can show you how to move, how to gather supplies without getting killed, and maybe even find others still alive. But it won't be easy, and it won't be safe." I swallowed hard. The weight of leadership pressed down harder than ever. Trusting her could save us, or it could be the decision that kills everyone inside the grocery store. Yet, in that moment, I felt something I hadn't felt in weeks. Hope. Hope that survival didn't have to mean hiding forever. Hope that maybe, just maybe, there was a way to fight back against the city that had swallowed Columbus whole. I looked at Emily. She nodded slightly, a silent agreement. "We'll do it," I said, voice firm. "But on our terms." Riley smirked. "Fair enough. You'll learn fast, or you'll die fast. There's no middle ground out here." And as she led us through the shadows of the city, I realized that the grocery store, our fortress, had been just the beginning. The real test of survival was about to start, and we were stepping directly into the unknown. The grocery store felt smaller the night we left it. Our barricades, our careful routines, our fragile sense of safety, they were all behind us now. I carried a crowbar, Emily a makeshift spear, and Riley moved silently, scanning every corner like the city itself feared her presence. "This route is the least traveled," she whispered, leading us down a narrow alley lined with abandoned storefronts. "The infected avoid it because it's too cluttered. But humans like shortcuts." I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. Humans had always been the wild card in this new world. Some were dead, some were desperate, and some, or something worse. The plan was simple. Reach a small convenience store on the edge of the industrial district, grab supplies, and get back before dawn. Simple in theory, dangerous in practice. The first sign of trouble was subtle. A groan echoed from a side street, low and hesitant. Not a horde, just one or two. We froze. Emily raised her spear and I gripped the crowbar tighter. They're slow. We can move, Riley whispered. Stay low, stay quiet. We pressed against the shadows, every step deliberate. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest as we skirted the first zombie, its milky eyes fixed on nothing, yet somehow sensing life. Then came the human threat. A barricade across the street, makeshift and crude, with a faint light flickering inside. Riley paused. Others are here. They've seen us. I froze. The infected weren't the only danger. Humans could be far worse. Emily looked at me, fear in her eyes. Should we try to avoid them? Riley shook her head. No. Too late. They've got eyes. We go through or we die out here. The confrontation was tense but brief. Two survivors emerged, weapons raised, faces pale and wild. Words were exchanged, hostile at first, then cautious. They were desperate, like most people we'd seen. They eyed our group warily, trying to gauge whether we were worth attacking or ignoring. In the end, we passed without violence, but the encounter left a bitter taste. Trust was a currency even scarcer than food. Finally, we reached the convenience store. The shelves were mostly empty, but we found enough. Canned goods, bottled water, first aid supplies. I stacked everything into my pack, grateful for the small victory. But as we prepared to leave, Riley stiffened. Wait, she said, eyes narrowing. We're not alone. From the shadows, a single figure emerged, moving slowly, deliberately, a stalker of some kind. Not infected, not human in any ordinary sense. Something else. Something intelligent. Emily gasped. What is that? I didn't answer. My gut told me this was only the beginning. The city wasn't just full of the undead and desperate survivors. It was hiding secrets we were only starting to glimpse. And with every step we took further from the grocery store, the truth became clearer. Survival wasn't just about food, water, and barricades. It was about understanding the rules of this new world and learning fast. Because if we didn't, we wouldn't make it to the next sunrise. The city felt alive in the worst possible way as we left the convenience store. Shadows stretched across broken streets, twisting in shapes that made my stomach knot. I nodded but said nothing. Experience had taught me that panic in the group could be as dangerous as the infected themselves. We had to stay focused, and right now, focus meant moving. We took a narrow back street, littered with debris and overturned trash bins. Every step was careful, every sound calculated. Then came the first sign that we weren't alone, the subtle click of a metal object against the pavement. I froze. Emily froze. Riley's head snapped toward the sound, eyes narrowing. Human, she hissed. And armed. A figure emerged from behind a burned-out car, holding what looked like a pipe. His face was hidden beneath a hood, but his posture screamed readiness to fight. Stop right there, he shouted, voice rough, desperate. Or I swear I'll. Riley stepped forward. We don't want trouble, she said calmly, her hand resting near the spear strapped to her back. We're just passing through. The man hesitated, eyeing us like we were predators. Passing through, he spat. This street's mine. I don't let anyone. Before he could finish, the groaning of the infected reached our ears. 1, 2, 3, emerging from the alleys we had ignored, drawn by noise or instinct. In an instant, everything shifted. The man's weapon dropped slightly, panic overtaking hostility. Riley barked orders. Move. Stay tight. Don't stop. We sprinted through the shadows, dodging overturned cars and debris, the infected close behind. I swung my crowbar when one lunged, Emily's spear finding its mark with precision. Riley led the way, her instincts flawless. Somehow we made it to an abandoned loading dock, the infected failing to follow into the precarious gaps of rubble. Our pursuer had vanished, probably retreating into another alley. Breathing hard, I looked at Emily. "We can't keep doing this," I said, voice shaky. "Every step outside the store is a gamble with death." Riley didn't answer immediately. She scanned the streets below, her expression unreadable. Finally she said, "This city isn't just dangerous. It's alive. And it knows how to kill you if you're careless. You survived this long because you stayed put. Now, you're learning to move." Her words hit harder than any groan of the undead. She was right. The grocery store had been a cocoon. Now every choice, every movement mattered. And the shadows themselves seemed to watch, waiting for mistakes. As we caught our breath, I realized something terrifying. Survival wasn't just about outlasting the infected. It was about outsmarting everyone and everything else lurking in these streets, humans, monsters, and the city itself. And in that moment, I understood the harsh truth. The world we once knew was gone. The rules had changed. And if we wanted to survive, we'd have to change too. We moved through the city like shadows, every step deliberate, every corner scanned for danger. Riley led us with a certainty I envied, weaving through streets I'd never dared traverse. The further we went, the more I realized just how much of Columbus had become unrecognizable: burned cars, abandoned homes, and streets littered with remnants of a world that no longer existed. Finally, Riley stopped at a nondescript brick building, its windows boarded, a faded sign declaring it Anderson Hardware long ago. "This is it," she said softly. "Our next stop. Safe for now." I studied the building. From the outside, it looked abandoned, but Riley's eyes gleamed with experience. She pushed open a side door, and I felt a wave of relief wash over me. Inside, the air was musty but breathable, and the layout was perfect. Small rooms for hiding, sturdy shelves for supplies, and even a narrow stairwell leading to a makeshift lookout. Emily exhaled, dropping her spear. Finally, a place to breathe. I nodded but didn't let myself relax. "Riley, are we the only ones who know about this?" She shook her head. "I've been careful. Only a handful of people know, and none of them are here. We can stay for now, but it won't last. Places like this don't stay hidden forever." We began settling in, stacking supplies and barricading entrances. Riley had a system, quiet, efficient, almost militaristic. I could see the difference between someone who had survived by chance and someone who survived by design. Hours later, as the city outside darkened, I heard a faint knock at the door. My heart skipped a beat. Riley froze, listening. "Stay behind me," she whispered. A voice called softly from outside. "Please, anyone there? I need help." Emily glanced at me, eyes wide. "We can't just leave them out there." I hesitated. Riley's hand rested on the spear strapped to her back. "It's a risk," she said quietly. "We don't know who or what we'd be letting in. But sometimes, trust is the only thing that keeps you human." I opened the door slowly. A young man, maybe 25, stood there, face pale, clothes tattered. He carried a small backpack and nothing else. His eyes were desperate, but there was an edge, something I couldn't place immediately. "What's your name?" I asked. "Ethan," he whispered. I've been on my own. Please, I won't cause trouble. I need shelter." Riley studied him, assessing his every move. After a long pause, she nodded. "Fine. But one wrong move, and you leave, or worse." Ethan nodded, relief flooding his face. We led him inside, quietly discussing where he could sleep and how we'd ration supplies. I watched him settle into a corner, and a thought struck me that sent a shiver down my spine. Survival wasn't just about fighting zombies anymore. It was about trust. And trust in this world was as fragile as the barricades we built. As night fell, I couldn't shake the feeling that bringing Ethan in might change everything. The safe house felt less like a sanctuary and more like a fragile thread holding together a world on the edge of chaos. And deep down, I knew that the moment we let someone new in, everything could unravel, because in this city safety was always temporary. The safe house felt different the next morning. What had once been a quiet refuge now buzzed with subtle tension. Ethan kept to himself, helping minimally with barricades and rationing, while Riley moved like a sentinel, scanning the streets outside every few minutes. I tried to focus on organizing our supplies, but something in the air unsettled me. It wasn't fear of the infected. Riley had taught us to handle that. No, this was something else. A gnawing sense that danger had moved inside our walls. Emily noticed it too. "Jack, do you feel it?" she asked quietly as we checked the pantry. "It's like someone's hiding something." I nodded slowly. "Yeah, I do. And I think it's Ethan." Riley's instincts proved right. Later that day, while I was checking the perimeter, I caught Ethan sneaking toward the hidden storage room. He froze when he saw me. I was just trying to steal our supplies," I finished, voice low but firm. His face paled. "I didn't want to. I just needed." I slammed my crowbar against the wall beside him. "We've risked our lives keeping you alive. You betray that, you're gone. Understand?" He nodded quickly, eyes wide. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean." Before I could respond, Riley appeared behind me, her expression icy. "Jack's right. In this world, betrayal is a death sentence, no matter how small. You take from us, you take from everyone. And that's not negotiable." Ethan dropped his gaze, trembling. "I won't do it again. I swear." I turned away, trying to mask the anger boiling inside me. Emily's hand found mine, giving a gentle squeeze. "We have to be careful, Jack," she whispered. "Trust is dangerous, but so is turning him away." Riley's eyes didn't leave Ethan. "We'll keep him, but under watch. Every move he makes, every choice, it will be observed. One mistake and he's out. Or worse." The tension in the safe house didn't fade. That night, sleep came in short bursts, interrupted by dreams of betrayal, of shadows moving silently, and of the infected closing in on us while we argued over trust. By morning, I realized that survival in this world wasn't just about fighting zombies or navigating abandoned streets. It was about managing people, keeping them alive, keeping them honest, keeping them from tearing each other apart. And the truth hit me like a crowbar to the chest. Sometimes the biggest threat wasn't outside the barricades. It was inside. I looked at Ethan across the room, saw the fear and guilt etched on his face, and knew one thing for certain. Our fragile safe house, our little refuge in this city of death, was now on borrowed time. And I didn't know how long it would last. The night fell like a shroud over the city, swallowing every street, every abandoned car, every shadow that might hide a threat. In the safe house, we huddled quietly, listening to the distant groans of the undead and the subtle creaks of the building settling under its own weight. Riley had stationed herself by the windows, spear in hand, scanning the streets with a precision I envied. Emily double-checked the barricades, while Ethan sat silently, eyes flicking nervously from wall to wall. I felt the weight of the silence pressing down on me. Every creak, every whisper of wind, every distant moan felt like a warning. And then, almost too late, I heard it, the soft crunch of gravel outside. "Outside," I whispered, my voice barely audible. Riley's eyes narrowed. "Multiple," she said, low and tense. "Not infected. Too coordinated." I grabbed my crowbar and crept toward the door, signaling Emily to follow. Ethan stayed put, hands trembling slightly. The safe house had gone from a refuge to a trap, and we all knew it. Then the pounding started. First one, then two, then a rapid barrage against the reinforced door. They wanted in, and they weren't negotiating. "Barricade stronger," Riley shouted. We heaved whatever we could against the door, tables, chairs, heavy shelving. The attackers didn't relent. The windows shook as something slammed against them, and a guttural voice shouted, "Open up! We know someone's in there." Emily's eyes met mine. "It's them, survivors," she said, dread in her voice. "Humans not infected." Riley growled, Humans are worse than the dead. Don't open. And then I realized something terrifying. If they got in, our safe house wouldn't just fall, it would be destroyed. Everything we'd fought for, all the progress we'd made, gone in minutes. I swung the crowbar at a weak spot in the door, bracing against it, and shouted, "We're not opening. Leave now or we fight." The pounding paused, and then came a mocking laugh. "You think you can keep us out? This city belongs to no one." I felt a surge of rage and fear mix in my chest. Emily tightened her grip on her spear, Riley's stance was deadly, and even Ethan seemed ready to act despite his earlier betrayal. Hours passed, or maybe minutes, it was hard to tell in the darkness. The attackers tested every weak point, but the barricades held. Finally, as if frustrated by our stubborn resistance, the sounds retreated into the night. We sank to the floor, breathing hard, muscles trembling from the effort. Ethan looked at us, pale and shaken. I didn't think they'd leave." I didn't answer. I just looked at Riley and Emily, realizing that survival wasn't just about fighting the undead or navigating streets. It was about enduring the human element, trust, betrayal, and violence lurking just outside our doors. Riley's voice cut through the silence. "This city will never let you rest. Not us, not the infected, not anyone. If we survive tonight, it's only because we're smarter, stronger, and merciless when we have to be." I swallowed hard, thinking about the weeks ahead. The night raid had shown us something important. Safety was temporary, trust was fragile, and danger could come from any direction, alive or dead. And deep down, I knew the worst was yet to come. The morning after the night raid was eerily silent. The city outside seemed to be holding its breath, and so did we. The adrenaline from the previous night had faded, leaving a gnawing tension that no amount of barricading could dispel. I moved through the safe house, checking each corner, each barricade, and each shadow. Emily was gathering what supplies remained, her movements methodical, almost mechanical. Riley sat in the corner, spear across her knees, eyes scanning the walls as if the attackers could emerge from the very plaster. And then there was Ethan, sitting alone, head in his hands. The night raid had shaken him badly, and I wasn't sure if he would ever recover the trust he had nearly destroyed with his earlier betrayal. "Jack?" Emily's voice pulled me from my thoughts. "Do you think they'll come back?" I hesitated. They might. Humans are unpredictable. They saw weakness. They saw that we were barricaded in, alone. That's all the temptation they need. Riley's voice was sharper when she spoke. "Humans are far worse than the dead. At least the infected follow instinct. Humans make choices, and sometimes those choices are fatal." It was true. I'd learned that the hard way over the past months. The world outside wasn't just dangerous because of what lurked in the streets. It was dangerous because of who, or what, we had to rely on to survive. Ethan finally spoke, voice trembling. I didn't mean to last night. I swear. I panicked." I looked at him, the memory of his first attempted betrayal still fresh. "Panic is one thing," I said. "Betrayal is another. If you make the wrong choice again, there won't be another chance." Riley's eyes didn't leave his face. "We can't trust him fully yet. And if we let that fear control us, we'll make mistakes. Mistakes kill people out there, and mistakes kill people in here." The day dragged on in tense silence, broken only by the occasional creak of the building or the distant groan of the infected. Every noise felt amplified, every shadow suspicious. I couldn't help but notice the cracks forming in our group. Emily's patience was thinning, Riley's vigilance bordering on paranoia, and Ethan was fading under the weight of his own guilt. By evening, the tension reached a breaking point. A small argument erupted over rationing, escalating far faster than it should have. Voices raised, accusations flew, and for a moment, I realized just how fragile our alliances had become. I slammed my hand on the table. "Enough. This isn't about who's right or wrong. This is about surviving. If we start fighting each other, we're already dead." The room went silent. Even Riley looked at me, expression unreadable. Emily's lips pressed into a thin line, and Ethan shrank back into his corner, shame and fear etched across his face. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my shaking hands. We survive together or we don't survive at all. That's the rule. Understand? A hesitant nod from Riley. A small, almost imperceptible agreement from Emily. Ethan swallowed hard and muttered, "I understand." But deep down, I knew the cracks hadn't fully healed. Fractured alliances didn't mend overnight, and in this world, a single crack could be enough to bring everything down. As night fell, I lay awake listening to the sounds of the city, the distant groans, the scuttling of rats, the echo of human footsteps, and realized something I hadn't fully admitted. The real danger wasn't just outside. It was inside. And sooner or later, those fractures would either save us or destroy us. The morning air in the safe house was thick with unease. Silence had replaced the chaos of yesterday, but it was a tense silence, the kind that wraps itself around your chest and refuses to let go. I could feel it pressing against me, pressing against all of us. Ethan hadn't left his corner all morning. His eyes darted nervously every time someone moved, every time a shadow shifted. I knew he was battling something inside, guilt, fear, maybe even shame, but in this world those were luxuries you couldn't afford. Riley broke the silence first. "We need to check the perimeter." Her voice carried authority, the kind that brooked no argument. "No excuses. Everyone comes." Emily and I nodded, grabbing our weapons. Ethan hesitated, then followed, shoulders hunched, hands shaking slightly as he held a makeshift bat. Outside, the city was eerily quiet. The streets were littered with debris, abandoned cars, and the occasional silhouette of a figure lurking far in the distance. I kept scanning, senses on high alert. But my attention kept drifting back to Ethan. We had been attacked once, betrayed once, and every step now was a test. And I wasn't sure if Ethan would pass or fail. Riley signaled a small alley ahead. "Check it," she whispered. Emily and I moved forward, weapons raised. Ethan lagged slightly behind. And then it happened. From the shadows, a small group of scavengers emerged, humans, armed, eyes wild. One of them lunged at Emily, but she twisted, striking him down with the butt of her spear. I swung my crowbar at another, catching him across the shoulder. And Ethan froze. I yelled, "Move! Help us!" He took a step back, then another, and finally, he ran. Not at us, not away from the danger. He ran toward the scavengers. Time seemed to slow. I watched in disbelief as he dropped his bat and started talking to them, gesturing frantically. I couldn't hear what he was saying over the chaos, but the look in his eyes was unmistakable. Fear and desperation. Riley cursed under her breath. "He's betraying us. Again." Emily grabbed my arm. "Jack, we can't." I didn't respond. I charged forward, hoping to intercept him before he crossed a line from which there was no return. But it was too late. The scavengers disappeared down the alley with Ethan, leaving us shaken and furious. The betrayal cut deeper than any zombie bite could. Back in the safe house, the tension was unbearable. Riley slammed her spear against the floor, and Emily's hands shook as she tried to barricade the doors. I stared at the empty corner where Ethan had been, a mix of anger, fear, and disbelief churning inside me. He had made his choice. And now we were left to deal with the consequences. I realized then that survival wasn't just about fighting the undead or securing safe houses. It was about making impossible decisions, about trusting and losing trust in a world that demanded constant vigilance. And Ethan's betrayal had taught me something chilling. Sometimes the people you let in are the very ones who can destroy you from within. As night fell, the city outside seemed darker, more hostile. The infected groaned in the distance, but their sound was almost secondary now. The real threat had always been human. And I knew deep down that the next choice we made, our choice, would determine if we survived another day or became just another cautionary tale. A year. 365 days since the world had turned upside down, since the infected had emerged and life as I knew it ended. A full year barricaded inside a grocery store in Ohio, surviving through fear, hunger, and human betrayal. The safe house had changed. We had fortified it beyond recognition, turning aisles into fortresses and cold storage into armories. Emily was leaner, tougher, eyes sharp with the precision of someone who had survived countless close calls. Riley was relentless, her vigilance bordering on obsession, but she had saved my life more times than I could count. And Ethan? He was gone. His betrayal had cost him everything, and though part of me mourned the loss of trust, I knew that in this world, survival often demanded ruthlessness. I stood by the front window, staring out at the streets that had once been bustling with life. Now, silence dominated them, punctuated only by distant groans, the shuffle of infected, and the occasional flicker of human movement. Every day had been a test, every night a battle. And yet we were still here. Emily joined me, her hand brushing against mine, a quiet reassurance. "We made it," she whispered. Not a celebration, not a relief. Just acknowledgement. We had endured, and that was victory enough in this broken world. Riley came up behind us, spear in hand, scanning the horizon as always. "A year," she muttered. "Survived. But for how long?" I didn't answer immediately. I thought about the past 12 months, the fear, the fights, the loss, and the moments of fragile hope. I thought about the people we had trusted, the mistakes we had made, and the lives we had managed to protect. Then I said quietly, "As long as we have each other, we keep going. That's all any of us can do." The groans outside reminded me that danger was never far. But for the first time in a long time, I felt a strange kind of calm. We had survived a year in a world that had gone mad. We had learned to trust even when it was dangerous. We had fought, lost, and endured. And though every day was uncertain, every night could be our last, we had proven something crucial. Humanity in all its flawed, desperate glory could endure. I closed my eyes for a moment, letting the weight of the past year settle. And in that silence, I promised myself something simple, something human. No matter what came next, we would survive. Together. Because after 365 days of horror, fear, and betrayal, surviving wasn't just about barricades or weapons. It was about resilience, loyalty, and the stubborn, unyielding spark of hope that refused to die. And as the city moaned outside, I knew we were still alive. And that, in a world ruled by death, was everything.